Hello YouTube, this is Hunter Search of the Brawler Cafe, bringing you yet another Tuesday analysis video. Today we are going to be talking about Trifecta. Trifecta is effectively a spiritual successor to Domination, which in a lot of ways is a lot better than Domination, but in other ways is not as good. So what is Trifecta's condition? Trifecta is of course shared by Haos and Ventus, and Trifecta gives you an additional effect if your team is holding 3 or more Baku cores. How does this condition compare? How good is this condition? Well, as a general rule, I feel that Trifecta is really good on Bakugan, but on every other card type, it is rather lackluster and needs to be really good to be worthwhile. And the reason for this is very simple. An action card, or like most other types of cards, other than evolutions or Bakugan character card effects, they need to be good on like any battle, like any stage of your team attack progression. It needs to be good at any point there. But with Trifecta, in a normal deck, that's going to take until your final attacker to have those 3 cores. Now, this is very different if you're playing a deck that has a lot of ways to accelerate your core pickups. If you can activate it on second and third, on second battle, then Trifecta cards that aren't Bakugan are a lot better. But just in general, Trifectas on Bakugan are so much better because you can just save that Bakugan for your last roll, as long as you only have one of them on your team. You can just save that Bakugan for your final roll, and it will basically always have its Trifecta effect. That's the basics of Trifecta. Let's get into things. Before we start, we're going to talk about the non-Trifecta dual cards for Ventus and Haos. So first up, we have Crystallize, 2 energy, plus 2 Frost Strike, and if the opposing player plays a flip card this turn, so if they flip in response to this damage, draw 2. This card is, I like some things about this card, but it's also kind of really contradictory. Like, a Frost Strike card that, like, gives you benefits off your opponent's playing a flip, it's just, it doesn't make sense. It's not a very cohesive design. I don't really understand it. I would love this card if it was, like, gaining damage. Because, as I established in my Age of Orlis analysis, I really like this whole mechanic for Ventus where you get bonuses for your opponent playing flips. But on a Frost Strike gaining card, it just doesn't make much sense. And the other one is Energetic Decay. This is a fairly generic card that does its job extremely well. The only problem is that like it's really hard to like really fit Haos Ventus into a deck that would want a stall effect like this. So it's 1 energy, minus 5 damage. Like, it's the simplest, most powerful stall type effect we have yet in the game. And of course it's very good against Might Mac decks as well. If we ever end up with like any sort of stall deck that runs both Ventus and Haos, this could be really great. And even outside of that, if you just want to counter Might Mac, it could be good there too. But I'm having a difficult time finding decks currently that this would fit into, but I think it has quite a bit of future potential, and it's something that I would probably pick up a playset of. It's only a common, so like it's easy to come by. So, moving on. So our mono Haos action for Trifecta is Prism Blast. This is effectively the Light's Courage of Trifecta. It's 2 energy for plus 300B, and when you're in Trifecta, it gets plus 700B instead. Now, despite all I said about Trifecta being a lot worse on actions, this is the one Trifecta card that I'm heavily considering and I'm very interested in trying out. Because like if specifically in a deck that's able to like consistently get Trifecta online on turn 2, God forbid turn 1, but I think that's very difficult to do. But in that case, this is a very powerful card. It's a bit weaker than Light's Courage, but Light's Courage can be difficult to maintain advantage for, especially if you're like, most Haos decks are a bit slower, so against like any good stuff stack, you're going to have a bit of trouble maintaining that domination, especially early game. So since Trifecta only cares about the Baku cores you're holding, I think it has like some decently high potential to replace Light's Courage in some decks. For the mono Ventus, trifecta action, we have Ventus Roar. 3 energy, plus 6 damage, and its trifecta effect is energizes uncharged. This does not make much sense. I don't understand why you'd make a trifecta effect a ramp effect. Like, those are kind of don't really mesh together very well. Like Bakucore, like gaining control and ramp just don't really mix all that well together, especially on a 3 energy card that's a damage booster that's only on par. Like, overall not very good. Oh, there's actually another dual card. It's kind of relevant to trifecta. So Heaven and Earth Strike is 3 energy, Ventus Haos. Reroll your Bakugan, and if it opened on the reroll, you can attach a Bakucore from the field to it. So obviously, this is going to help you activate your trifecta effects. This is also just a generally solid card if you want to be stealing cores. Of course, Glimmering Glaive gets much higher priority than this, but this is also pretty solid too. I haven't found any decks I can really slot into yet, but it's definitely one I'm very much keeping my eye on. Before I saw Glimmering Glaive, I saw this card, I was like, oh, Consort's gone. Consort's gone. Yeah, I like this card quite a bit. Has some pretty high potential. Next we have Divine Evolution, which is 2 cost, plus 200B, plus 2 damage. And if you're in Trifecta, plus 500B, plus 5 damage. This is very similar in problems to Dark Rain in that like it's barely above curve for both sides. And it has a rather hard condition on it too. And that condition just makes it like difficult to justify when it's not giving you that much above par in either category. Mixed bonus cards like this can be nice if they're really good. But when they're like just above par like this, like they're just not worth it. It's better to just be focused. Our mono faction hero for Trifecta is Wynton the Hungry. This is relevant for reasons other than its Trifecta effect. Its Trifecta effect is pretty mediocre. If you're in Trifecta, your Bakugan attacks get plus 3 damage and plus Shadow Strike. But it is a Wynton that has only 1 energy. So this card is going to be a big boon for Wynton Trox decks. I still feel that that's going to be a bit of a pet deck, but it really helps activate Titan Trox Ultra's additional stat gain. So it has really solid potential there. Our dual faction hero for Trifecta is Wynton. This is 3 energy, which is a bit pricey for what it does. It's basically meant as an enabler for Trifecta. Your Bakugan get Victor, attach a Fist Core from the field to this. I'm not a big fan of this card. I think it's way too expensive for what it's doing. And like Consort, Heaven and Earth Strike, and Glimmering Glaive are just far, far better enablers of Trifecta than this card. For our keyword gear, we have Lightning Striker. This is 3 energy, so effectively 1. Plus 200B, which is not much stat gain. And when you're in Trifecta, you get plus 7 damage. Thankfully, this is not on play, so this is active continuously as long as you have Trifecta. But 1 energy for plus 200B and a damage effect is not fantastic. If you're in a deck that like has a low damage Bakugan, like something that I could see this fitting well on is Ventus Hydronoid, which has a pretty solid Evo in a Divine Intervention deck, which of course requires Haos, so this would be here. This that would enable you to play this. However, it keeps its very low 1 damage, so it would very much appreciate a gear that could buff up its damage a bit. So I could see Lightning Striker being good there, but otherwise, I have a really hard time seeing this being good. Now for the Bakugan, who, as I established before, are really the stars of the show when it comes to Trifecta effects. Like 2 of these 3 I've already talked about. I've talked about in previous videos because of just how good they are. Maximus Trox Ultra, 7 energy, 1509. In Trifecta it becomes 3k, 15. Its base form is 800B with a magic shield. It's just incredible. Very high cost Evo that can make things a bit difficult, but otherwise real solid. Next up is Hyper Trox Ventus, 3 energy, 800B, and if you're in Trifecta, it gets plus 400B. Nothing too incredible, especially since Trox is like just a fairly basic 500B magic shield Bakugan, and you're only getting 300B off this. Like, Like you need to be in trifecta to get a barely above curve increase in B power, which is just not very good. And lastly, of course, Maximus Dragonoid. This is like my favorite card in the set because it enables my favorite card, Tusk Card. 5 costs, comes on a Bakugan that's 600B and has a Magic Shield and Helix. When you're a trifecta, it's free, 1207, solid stats. It's just all around a fantastic Bakugan. It having 1200B like really makes me wonder why they even bothered with Hypertrox. Like this is just so much better than it. Anyways, this card is just like really incredible. Probably the best trifecta card, and I just love it a lot. I love it a lot. This card's great. So in summation, as I said at the beginning, trifecta is really good on Bakugan when the trifecta effect is worthwhile. But on actions, it tends to be lackluster. However, of the ones we've covered so far, trifecta has the most good cards. But those good cards are more good standalone rather than good as a collective. Now there definitely is enough good stuff here that you can justify making a deck around trifecta using Maximus Dragonoid plus Maximus Trox, and using a bunch of core stealing effects to enable stuff like Prism Blast and Lightning Striker maybe. So yeah, trifecta is like trifecta as an archetype, if that becomes a thing, will be more about making good trifecta actions live much earlier in your team attack process, and not so much like synergies between the trifecta effects themselves. It would be like a half and half dealie between like trifecta effects themselves and effects that are getting you the cores that you need to activate trifecta. So yeah, Prism Blast solid in certain decks. Maximus Dragonoid, Maximus Trox Ultra, good in basically everything. Wynton the Hungry, good in Titan Trox builds. And lastly, Heaven and Earth Strike, potentially good enabler for a trifecta deck. Yeah, that's trifecta. Next week we are going to be covering Boost, which I feel is a hidden gem of these keywords that is not being talked about enough. With that said, this is Hunter Surge signing off.